Hello, once again, it is literary as FECK time with me, Clive Davis, and him over there.
Ah, Nick.
And oh, yeah, it's the depth of your
Meh.
name.
Yes, yeah. It's tiresome.
Um, so
I
today,
was briefly, actually, I was briefly considering going back to the version of it. And my dad called me by it the other day, Nicky, which has been many, my mom was like, that's funny. Like you haven't called Nicky in many a year. But I was like, you know what? There's something comforting about the name I had until I was 14. So yeah, every now and again, I consider the possibility of bringing the Y back.
what happened when you were 14 that you brought your foot down and demanded you be called Nick from now on? Or
I moved to Canada and was told by narrow-minded parochial people that in North America that's a girl's name, and so
I see.
that time I lacked the spiritual fortitude to be like, no, because I'm sure if we'd moved to Brooklyn or
Interesting how once you left rural Ireland, it took you until you get to Canada before you encountered narrow-minded.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yes. Wicklow Town is known for its broad-minded thinking, and um, yeah. No, I mean, it's funny, but yeah, I feel like if we moved to to New York, Nikki would be a perfectly acceptable name for, you know.
So did your entire family have to just resist the temptation to just
I
keep on calling you
suppose,
Nicky?
I suppose, yeah. It's fine. I've never really
Hmm.
considered it from their point of view, but yeah, at some point
Well, you don't
within it.
refer to you probably didn't introduce yourself as "Hi, I'm Nicky," right? You probably
I did at the
wouldn't have
beginning
offended you.
when we first moved to Canada. I definitely did. And then very quickly I adjusted to Nick when, yeah, people kept telling me that's a girl's name. Which, as I said, it's a really weak thing to do. I like in hindsight, I do feel like I should bring it back just for the sake of maybe that's my real self, you know.
Which brings us smoothly to
Absolutely, that's the best transition we've yet had.
the subject of Ramsey Campbell. So
Mm,
uh, we will be putting another show out for Halloween, but I suppose this would count as well, right?
absolutely,
Double
yeah.
Halloween show.
Mhm.
So this came about. Obviously, I'm assuming you were very familiar with the name of Ramsey Campbell, as was I, right? Um,
Yes, although I haven't read as much of him as I should have.
well,
And
this is the thing. This is the thing. So this came about particularly. I befriended Ramsey Campbell on Facebook, uh,
mhm,
and because he's famously he's a he's a very approachable man, as much a fan as as anyone else, right? He's
mhm.
very he's kind of famous for being someone who turns up at cons and things, and you can just have a chat with him, and but very open fellow.
Mm, yeah.
And so I can't remember why, but I sent him something, or just sent him a friend request or something. And obviously, he's quite diligent about not wanting to clutter his life up with like
Mhm.
people he doesn't know, whatever. So I actually got a response just like, "Yeah, who's that then?" Just to check
Right.
I got a
Yeah.
robot or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just wrote back, "Oh, I don't have anything special to say. Sorry, just a fan." And he accepted my friend request. But then I was thinking about it. Oh, hang on now. Um, Slightly disingenuous. Not that I'm not a fan, but what I
Mhm.
realized was, considering that I am, I've actually read very little of his fiction as well.
Mm.
And I think it might be one of those things. So I first encountered him in my teens, like in the 90s, and I'll get to that specifically in a minute because it's quite interesting. But and he was obvious, like he was so obviously head and shoulders above most people writing horror fiction. He like
Mhm.
immediately becomes one of those names. Like, oh yeah, Rams Campbell. But then I think some things that you attach to in your teens that are like um they're very easy to take for granted or something. Like they
Yes.
become part of the what? Could they become part of your who you are in a way. It's like how you reference yourself through the things that you're interested in. And then sometimes you forget to actually do the
The
work.
deep dive.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think I'd read some really great short stories I really liked and stuff like that. But then, yeah, I don't, I think I might have read one or two novels and enjoyed them as well, but then kind of took for granted that he's there. I
Hmm.
didn't actually read them until, coming to read these two. But the ones, because the other thing as well is he also wrote for Video Watchdog for a while, Ramsey's Rambles, and
Hmm.
he wrote for Stephen Thrower's Eyeball zine back in the day. But the one thing that
Which is funny because there's an interesting part of the first book we're going to talk about that really speaks to
yes,
the
yes,
whole
yes,
mimeographed, Gorzine culture of that time.
yes, and quite we will get to that because it's quite
Yeah, yeah.
it is
Mhm.
quite interesting. But he also, so I have a copy of the I think it's the Penguin Encyclopedia of the Horror and the Supernatural, um, stolen from a library. I think I don't know if I stole it or Darren stole
Hmm.
it or someone, but anyway, me and
Hmm.
Darren read this. It's a good book. It must be from the 80s or something, I'm guessing.
Hmm.
And it's got a lot of essays on all the things you'd expect. And there's Ramsey Campbell's got some essays in there, and there's one in particular. I think it's called the Pits of Terror or the Pits of Horror or something. And it's an essay all about how to appreciate bad films, right? Like
Hmm.
how some of the very best so-called bad films kind of transcend and
Hmm.
kind of become really interesting. It's a really good essay, and as well as I already know about Michael J. Weldon and Sectronic and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Along with those things, it was a really important kind of essay for me to read and put these things in context.
Hmm.
Specifically, by the end of the essay, he narrows down. He talks about lots of different things, but then he offers like two sublime examples of
Hmm.
like if you're into these are it's kind of this kind of the pinnacle of when the yeah
Transcendent bad cinema. Yeah.
yeah, and the two titles he offers are From Hell It Came and The Sting of Death.
Don't think I've seen either of them.
Oh, maybe
Okay.
we should do a spin
Maybe
the
we
boo.
should.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this sounds good because I would love to talk to you about these two. Oddly enough, I'd seen From Hell It Came because it used to play late night TV when I was a kid, and it is something quite special. And so I knew I could trust this guy
Yes.
because
He was steering you right.
yes, and Sting of Death I'd never heard of, and the way he explains Sting of Death is 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 so compelling, and it was very hard to see in those days as well. So then, when a few years later, when it came out on a something weird DVD double bill, I was all over it, and luckily the film totally lives up to
Okay.
Ramsey Campbell's memories of it. But it was so important to both me and Darren that years before we saw the film or even a chance to see the film, we would reference this film that we'd never seen
Hadn't seen.
because
Nice.
basically it's about a guy who decides to put a jellyfish on top of his head and walk about underwater and attack people.
That
It,
sounds amazing.
it is really good.
That
But as
sounds
Ramsey comes in, the jellyfish
wow.
on his head kind of looks like a plastic bag or something, right? So there's
Right.
photos, and I saw one. There's photos of me and Darren, like well, I'm like 16, 17, something like Darren's a few years older, and we're posing with like plastic bags on our head. And it took me a minute. Why are we doing that? Sting of Death. That's our,
Right.
which
Oh
of
my.
course no one would ever pick up on. No one would ever. Ah, you're referencing Sting of Death there, young man. But yeah, so that essay in particular was particularly so. Yes, I thought it's about time for me to actually
Mhm.
re-engage with because he's written a lot of stuff. He's very
Oh
prolific.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me. the first place I would have seen his name was when I was as a teenager again, when I was 15, I took out like a large hardback collection of the first three books of Blood, which is it's interesting. That's a version I wish I had. It was I took it out of the library, and
Hmm.
it was much better edited than the little I don't know if it was Sphere or whoever it was that put out the smaller, like the little that's the six paperback versions that are
Yes.
the really beautiful cover paintings by Clive Barker. But the actual text is like full of typos and like it's quite egregious given that
Oh,
Clive
really?
Barker is a very
That's
good
interesting
writer.
because that anthology one was the one I read as well, with all
Yeah.
in one place. Yeah.
And it's much smoother and it's a much better edited copy of the text. And they still seem to be publishing like when they publish it, they still seem to go back to to my mind, the wrong version. Unless there is, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. There may be a more recent, better version. But anyway, Ramsey Campbell's name comes up there because he was instrumental, I think, in helping Clive Barker kind of get his work better known because they're both Liverpudlian.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
And as you were saying, Ramsey Campbell kind of was well known for being somebody very open and very approachable and
Yes.
very willing to support, and also very impressively, I think, recognized in those early stories by Clive Barker, like, wow, this guy may be a major talent, um, in terms of, a kind of a slightly new, um, as what we have Stephen King's famous, I have seen the future of horror, quotes that was plastered everywhere. But then, and then I kind of then I don't know if I followed up at that point, but I was the name interested me. I was like, that's an interesting name, and he seems to really, to know what he's all about. He may have even done an introduction, possibly,
Yeah.
to
Sounds about right, maybe.
to the books
Yeah.
of Blood. Um, and then later on, when I was in my later teens, early 20s, and I became obsessed with H.P. Lovecraft, then the name comes up again, right? Because you're
Hmm.
looking at who else writes in this tradition, and then who else, in fact, has written books very much set within the Cthulhu mythos, right?
Right.
And yeah, his earliest work is very much informed. So I must have tracked down somehow a copy of that early collection of his where they're all set in England, right?
Where
Apparently,
specifically it's like the Severn Valley, it's like
yes,
the northwest, right?
yeah, because apparently, I guess I was reading initially he wrote some of those stories set in the actual, Miskatonic kind of setting, and then he was
Hmm.
encouraged by August Derleth, who was, the for those of you who don't know, it was kind of the guy who managed Lovecraft's legacy after he died and kind of put all of the work back into print. And he was encouraged by him to no, this will be more effective if you set it in places that you know. And
Right.
so
Right.
he created this. So I definitely would have read those and liked them. And then yeah, and then you kind of in a way just fell out of it again. And then it wasn't until you brought him up that I was like, oh yeah, definitely that's something I want to
Yeah.
do.
I haven't read any of the Cthulhu stuff, and I really want to. I think that's where I'll go next because, well, number one, I love that stuff anyway. And to be honest, there's a lot of people playing in
Yep, in that
that hand of
sandbox.
it, yeah,
Yep,
but few get it right.
yep, yep.
But I'm guessing Ramsey Campbell is one of the ones who kind of
Well, the other
adopt,
one
right?
that I would have read as well. I did read some of Lumley's mythos stuff as well.
Hmm.
Probably around the same time as I was reading, and I did
This is
find,
Brian Lumley, right?
yeah, I did find his
Not
slightly
Joanna Lumley's
no, no,
writers,
yeah.
yeah.
Although her mythos fiction is surprisingly decent, but
Absolutely Yoggoth Falaulabulus.
that's the one. Um, no, but I definitely found Ramsey Campbell stuff more. The texture was right. Like it felt much. I mean, really, it may be the very best, I think, of the Lovecraft stuff not written by Lovecraft.
Yeah, because it's a difficult thing, isn't it, to cross that line from pastiche into making it your own.
Your own,
Uh,
yeah,
and you understand why, because all of us who the first time you read Lovecraft, it's so tempting to, because he does tap in, he really does. People call it cosmic horror, but he does tap into some kind of, because I remember my reaction to, or one of my reactions to reading Lovecraft for the first time was just that sense of like, fuck, there's could be some
Yes.
hidden gateway to a world like anywhere, like especially if you grow up rural, like growing up
Oh
in,
yeah.
there were so many places that I just wander around the countryside in my kids and teens, and you're just thinking, oh, like that cave over there, or that
Hmm.
like, and it's and it just put you in that mindset where it just stuck with you, and you would wonder. Well, I would. I don't know. I had this when I was a kid, much younger, before I read Lovecraft. When I was a small kid, I had this thing about going to video shops and stuff and looking at the back of video covers and paperback art and that stuff, really evocative kind of things. And maybe I wouldn't always get the books or the videos or whatever, but the images would stick in my head, and I would literally just wander about in fields and
Hmm.
just imagine this shit like coming down and for
Hmm.
hours, hours and
Oh
hours
yeah.
was like in my own head,
Hmm.
and then that went away a little bit, um, going into puberty, and then for me Lovecraft was reignited.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think that there's a real strong sense of place in all of his writing, right? I mean, I think like the landscape and the kind of the town. I mean, like I feel like I've lived in Innsmouth. There's something about that like I could draw a map of like Gilman Street, just like that, and that hotel. Um, and I think that, yeah, I completely agree. I think that's something that maybe also it comes from that Celtic thing of like we have these stories of the stones and we have these stories of the idea of being able to pass into the mounds, the she, as they're called in Gaelic, right? This idea that there is this kind of like parallel almost life that still goes on, like this
Mm,
pagan kind of thing, right? And that informed Machen, right?
right.
And then Machen informs Lovecraft. So there's to me, it felt really of a piece of that of my childhood of
Yeah.
seeing those ancient stones, Newgrange, all that stuff. Um,
Well, it's fascinating as well because it works at its best, which I'm guessing is why Derleth, um, you know, told Campbell to set stuff in places that he knew, and there, and then obviously Lovecraft and Macken stuff as well. Is around the places that he knew and stuff like that. So, but at the same time, it's localized, but also tapping into this kind of weird, because that's the thing as well. Because it taps into this universal feeling, it's almost as if yeah, there's a portal over here, there's a portal over here,
yeah.
there's a portal
Hmm.
over there, but it's all kind of connected somehow,
Hmm.
spaghetti like under the
Yes.
roots, like tree roots kind of networking and sharing information and stuff like that. And
And there's a mashup of a bunch of things that are appealing, I think, to teenagers, but then they're appealing in good and bad ways. But there's conspiracy, right?
right,
There's a
yeah,
sense
yeah.
of conspiracy in a lot of Lovecraft and in a lot of what comes out of his writing. And then the sense of this alien, they're as almost as much science fiction as they are
Oh yeah,
they're
yeah, yeah.
with horror trappings. And somebody once said that Alien may be one of the greatest Lovecraft, films ever made. And I think that that's a pretty good argument. We'll talk about this later when we talk about At the Mountains of Madness, which I recently reread. And I was thinking a lot of the time, like, my God, the original Alien really borrows a lot in a way,
Mm,
from that feeling that you get
yeah,
in.
but in that case, kind of like in a second-hand way, right? Because I suppose the one that really taps into that, you know, elder gods thing is Mario Bava's Planet of the Vampires, which is
Oh, of
a
course.
place for Alien. So I think
Yes.
it comes via that, right?
Mhm. Yes. Um, so I mean, back. So what's interesting about the two books that you chose is we're not so much. I mean, maybe in Fellstones we are a little bit in that Lovecraft cosmic horror
I think
space,
in both of these to a certain
you
extent.
know. But to me, they feel even more a part of that like adjacent folk horror tradition, which I also totally love. Because again, it completely speaks to that rural Celtic childhood of wandering the fields and feeling a vague sense of wonder and menace at, the fairy
Yeah.
circle and the rest of it, right?
Before we get down to it, I would just because we're on the subject, I would like to throw out one recommendation of I don't know if you've seen this film. Uh, one of the few films in recent years that I saw that actually tapped into that
Mhm.
wandering the fields thinking of paperback covers and VHS art that you saw was did you ever see Under the Skin?
No.
Ah, okay. Uh, you should see that because it's a
Okay.
great film
Okay.
anyway. But yeah, that really sent me immediately to that
Okay.
headspace, which I wasn't expecting because it doesn't seem necessarily like it would be that kind of film from the outset. But yeah, that did definitely tap into that for me. So that's a recommendation. We could do a unrelated to any of our other shows, Yakisina Soba with From Hell It Came, The Sting of Death, and Under the Skin.
Sure.
So I'm quite
Yeah.
yeah, okay, we'll do that
Mhm.
then. Anyway, um
So the
yes,
first of the two, so we read two,
yeah,
and the first of them was Ancient Images.
yes, first put out in 89 by Tor, and you can now get it. We've got a Kindle from Flame Tree Press, which the other
Mhm.
second book is from as well. They seem to be his publisher of choice now, right? Flame Tree Press.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, so just to do this ass backwards,
Sure.
uh,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering if this might have struck you as well, because I'm thinking I might have lent you this book and you might have read it as well. So I was under the impression, I don't know why, so Ancient Images from 1989, and for some reason, I don't know why, I thought it was from a little bit later. I thought it was from the 90s or something like that, right?
Okay.
So I'm reading Ancient Images, and we'll get to the plot in a minute. So, but
This
yeah,
good.
and there's parts of this plot, and I'm thinking, hang on now, I've read this before, and I'm
Okay.
thinking of the book Flicker by Theodore Rorschach.
Okay.
You remember
Interesting.
this?
So this, I don't. Yeah, I do actually. Yes, I do remember you did lend this to me ages
Yes,
ago.
yes, a book, yeah, about like a cursed film, lost film,
Hmm.
and the terrible things that happened to people who saw it, and the film was kind of ingrained with this kind of in the way that people, said the Exorcist was cursed, the actual film.
Right, right. And then
Right,
The Ring obviously made much of this later
right,
on.
right.
This
And I'm
concept.
I'm reading this, and I'm thinking, oh, that's quite the swipe there. Not necessarily what I would
Hmm.
expect from Ramsey Campbell, right? You don't
Right.
think of him
Mhm.
as a plagiarist, right?
No, no.
And then, of course, I figured out, oh no, I've got it wrong. It's the other way around.
Yes.
Ancient Images,
Yes.
of course, was
Yeah,
his
comes
book. But
first.
then, interestingly, in the introduction, he mentions he wrote a follow-up to Ancient Images, right? Was it called Grin in the Darkness or something like that? And he had a second run at, and that did come out post Flickr,
Okay.
and some people did accuse him of ripping off Flickr, but they didn't realize that he was actually mining territory that he'd already kind of
Hmm. Mapped
come up with
himself.
himself. Yeah. Uh, Having said that, though, I've been thinking about this since, and it's been a while since I've read Flickr, and but it hasn't Flickr hasn't gone down in my estimation, I think, because there's enough of a difference
Hmm.
between the two books. Because I remember liking Flickr quite a bit. I thought it was a rollicking read, and even after having read After Images, and clearly there must, I don't think it could be, but I don't think it is just a coincidence. I don't know. I don't follow this stuff close enough. There could even be, in entire, I'm sure there are entire internet threads and
Mhm.
essays and stuff about, whether this was a conscious rip of blah 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 blah. But at the end of the day, I don't think it matters because I think they're both
No.
fun books. And Flickr does go in a slightly different direction, I think, because that's only part of After Images as well, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, so we start off that's the beginning of the story. Is there's a woman whose main job is she's an editor for
Mhm.
television, right? And she has a friend who's a film archivist, and
Yeah. He seems to seek like he can. Yeah. He seems to seek out lost. I mean, he would have been good to have on the Doctor Who case.
right,
Track down some of those fucking lost episodes. But yes, he kind of he does that work for some TV station she works at.
yes, and he's come up with this Lost Lugosi and Karloff film
Mhm.
made in the UK in the 30s, right?
Tower of Fear is
Yes,
the
yes.
title. Yeah.
And he's actually managed to somehow locate a print of this film.
Mhm.
And immediately, it seems, upon having uh, threaded his home projector and seen a little bit, um, something's happened, and it seems like either he's committed suicide
Mhm.
or has been murdered in some way.
Right. But he
And it's
takes a header. He takes a header off of a building,
mm,
and then Sandy, who's our protagonist, she actually sees him through kind of glass. It's a very almost an Argento kind of a moment where
it's a bit
she sees him.
crystal plumage, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and then he leaps off this building to his death, and it's unclear as to why or what's happened.
Yeah, yeah, and it is it the film that pushed him to do it, or is
Mhm.
it someone else? And to be honest, I'm still not entirely sure
No,
after I finish the
no,
book, but that's not the problem. Um,
no,
this is
no.
this is nice, this is good ambiguity. I like this.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's that element, right? And then she's make because there's a lot of other people who kind of poo-poo the existence of this film, and they think he was he was mistaken, he didn't find this film. And then also there's all these rumors about, yeah, how the film has was kind of cursed and it was horrible to work on, and it might even the sets might even have been haunted or something like that along
Yeah.
those lines.
And there's a particular film critic who's very contemptuous of the whole thing.
Yes, who might also be some kind of ageless kind of film critic who seems to have been
Yeah,
around.
yeah, because he was actually around when the film was made. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, and it's particularly him that she gets, he writes something very disparaging, and then she kind of gets upset and decides to defend the legacy of her dead friend by
right.
proving that the film exists. So she sets about trying to locate another print of the film and prove that it really exists.
Yes, and from the offset as well, like as soon as she, what I liked about this, one of the elements I liked was as soon as she, is in any way kind of connected to this world, because obviously at the very beginning of the book, she doesn't know anything, and then she's,
Mhm.
slowly starts to learn of this. Almost immediately, she gets this uneasy sense of things half glimpsed out of the corner
Mm,
of her eye, or
yes.
things scuttling around, or just shadow,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
that's seeded throughout, and I really
Yeah.
like it's
Hmm.
it's almost slightly over egged. They almost overdo it a little bit, I think.
There is, in fact, in both books, there's it goes right up to the line of like how many times can somebody justify something like that can't be what I just saw. Like, I
Right,
must have seen this.
right.
Yeah,
But it's good.
but still enjoyable.
It gives you the shiver. Yeah, it's that whole it's that M.R. James whistle and I'll
Mm.
come to you, um
Mhm.
what's a warning to the curious kind of thing,
Mhm.
right? Where did
And
he
it's
just
something
yeah.
Lovecraft himself did a lot as well, right? A
Hmm.
lot, a lot of his stories are his first person protagonists kind of justifying and explaining things away so they don't have to deal with this horrifying otherworldly mind splintering thing.
Yeah.
So
So she's traveling around, tracking down different people who are still alive who are involved with the film and piecing this all together.
The
Neil,
saddest part of that is the kind of sad, like down on his luck 70 something comedian who was apparently was the comic relief in the original film and
right,
now like Butlin's almost
end of the
somewhere.
pier show. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's quite an effective little piece of the book.
yeah. And meanwhile, there are some travelers, right? Enoch's people.
Enoch's people, yes. Which is a
Uh,
cool that seemed very 80s to me in an interesting
yes,
80s by way of 60s in that way that there was still these kind of
yeah.
hanging
Well,
on.
that part was very strong for me because the
Oh,
village
yes.
I grew up in
Hmm.
would be a place that travelers were actually attracted to. And I remember, and my village was having none of it when I was a kid.
Yeah, you
Like,
said they were like literally building fortifications
well,
and
yeah,
sharp
you were
stakes and
talking
stuff.
about parochial closed-mindedness. So we
Hmm.
have a big common, which
Yeah.
is of course common land in our village, and the travelers annually would have a kind of route, just like Enoch's people. They'd go, different places, and one of the places was Llangado Common. And yeah, as soon as word came out that the convoy of travelers was on the way, yeah, they'd cover the common in slurry to begin with. And then there were
Hmm.
actually people, there were farmers out there with, shotguns. And
Hmm.
I don't believe anyone actually ever got shot or anything. But, they were out there in force to let people know you're not welcome here.
Yeah. Hmm.
Um, and actually, a few years later, it was quite interesting because a friend of mine who was very briefly in primary school with me, who was a traveler. His family, his mother, him and his brother were travelers, and I ended up reconnecting because I had another friend who lived in kind of like a bit of a commune, and back of their commune on this mountain where they were welcome was a place where they would congregate for for months of the year or whatever when it was, I don't know, too cold to travel or something,
Hmm.
and people left them alone there. And I remember me and my friend being unusually for us in this commune, we didn't have any weed, so we decided to go and score from these travelers.
Hmm.
We went up there, and lo and behold, my old friend from primary school was there, and I was like, "Oh,
Okay.
yeah." I didn't even really, because I was very, very young, so I didn't even put two and two together that he was a traveler when I was a.
Hmm.
So I kind of reconnected with him while someone else went over to another um, caravan to score, and
Hmm.
yeah, it was kind of interesting. Yeah,
We had, I mean, there was traveling families that lived up behind our estate, and there was like a neighboring estate which was a bit more. It was a council estate,
yeah,
right up behind where we lived, and so at the outskirts of the council estate, there were several caravans that were they were more like they were like permanent, oh, no way permanently settled, but they were still very much traveling families.
yeah, and it's funny as well. Because I think the ones in this book are very sympathetic, right? They're very
Yeah, and they do seem
sympathetic.
more hippie-ish almost in a
Yeah,
way than they actually seem like proper like Irish itinerants, which is a culture unto
yeah,
itself.
yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
just a bunch of Woodstock rejects, you
What
know.
you're not allowed to call pikeys anymore, basically.
Yes,
And it's
yes.
interesting. There is a division. I think this is people who have never know anything about this world. Yeah, they don't understand there is that yeah, you do have your more hippie
Well, yeah,
types.
like there's the middle class dropouts, and then there's the people who have for the last 400 years been living
Yes,
this marginal
yes.
life,
And
right?
to be fair, they are, yeah, they are. I don't understand what my village was terrified of from these fucking hippies. But having, you know, pikeys near your home, that's slightly more. I understand why some people might have been a little bit
Hmm.
frightened of them, right? To be
Hmm.
honest with you, because they're a different breed, right? They're a different breed of people. That's fair to say, I think, without controversy. Without controversy.
Yeah. I mean, in Ireland, it's interesting because the extent to which they were discriminated against was something I wasn't even aware of growing up. But
Hmm.
like, basically, they're regularly, and apparently still to this day, but definitely apparently when I was growing up, would be refused entry in pubs, in restaurants and stuff. Basically told like, you're not coming in here,
Yeah,
which is kind of amazing to me to think like, that there was kind of an active segregation of the traveling community in Ireland. But that's it. Yeah, it's they could bring problems for sure.
yeah, and they
Some of
reacted
them.
differently. They closed ranks, and they wouldn't have taken the shit that the hippies did,
No, 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 for sure.
or they would have retaliated in some
In
fashion.
kind, yeah, for sure. Um, but anyway, so Enoch's army to me seems a bit more of more of a hippie holdover than a
Yes,
proper itinerant. Yeah,
yes, and also her investigations lead her to a village.
hmm.
Um, I think
Redfield,
what's it called?
Redfield.
There we go. Thank I knew you'd.
And it's very, yeah, I mean, that's again one of those things like we had a melancholy lane in Wicklow where supposedly I don't remember I don't remember if it was like Vikings or if it was like the British, but that famously it was one of these cases where apparently a church was set on fire and when everyone kind of came out they were slaughtered and so it had this these names in again we have a long enough history that we have these names that
I,
speak
I
to
I'm
tragedy.
sure you must be mistaken there, Nick.
Hmm.
I don't think the British have ever caused any trouble in Ireland, as I believe.
Oh,
No, no, no,
yeah, that's so yeah, no, must not have been them then.
no. You've been mistaken. It was the Finns,
Yes, yeah, there's those fuckers.
bastards. Um, so anyway, yes, and yeah. So this is where the folk. I mean, no fault of that. This is just because it looms so large over this. When you are
Yes.
introduced to the, um,
Lord Redfield.
yeah, you are imagining Christopher
Immediately
Lee
seeing
with
Christopher
leather
Lee,
patches. Yeah,
Tweed.
I mean, there's
Yes, yeah.
no
There's
there's no
no
way
way to
around
get
it.
away from it. Yeah.
Yeah. But yes, and it's a wheat growing town, right? Like,
Yes.
there's
Yes. They
delicious
make
bread.
it incredible staff of life bread.
That's right. And that's really good as well. I like that stuff about how she, again, there's a lot of stuff in this book that is just alighted on briefly and then and yeah, she almost
Quite
becomes
creepy.
addicted to how
It's bread, which
yeah.
has a dense iron kind of
Hmm.
which, again this idea of the soil literally steeped in blood that produces
Yes.
this incredibly rich wheat.
And all of these things kind of, yeah, I mean, we don't want to give any spoilers, but
Yeah, but
all
it
these
all
things,
dovetails
yeah, come
very
together.
well.
Yes. And yeah, no, to your point, you were saying about the Enoch stuff that really does situate it in the 80s. And that's when I was reading as well. At first, like I said, out the Flickr thing, but then I realized, oh, hang on, there's no cell phones or there's nothing like,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, hang on, this is clearly set. At some point in the 80s, I wasn't sure if it was mid 80s or late.
It feels like Thatcher's Britain to me.
The tail end of that, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then also well then this whole video nasties like kind of
Yes, yeah. So we were going to mention some brief characters we introduced to who are clearly like people working on a eyeball like fanzine or
yeah,
something along those lines, and who are like almost
very Chaz Balloon or the
yeah
British equivalent.
and almost militantly kind of. And this is interesting actually because I felt as if for a brief part, Sandy's character was quite an interesting mouthpiece for Ramsey Campbell a little bit here, right? Because
Mhm.
I think, yes, though, I would have been one of those. I didn't have a zine, but I probably was about a hair's breadth away from actually starting one, right?
Right.
If I'd have been born a few years earlier, almost definitely. But yeah, I was part of that whole generation that grew up where you couldn't see anything you wanted to see because the BBFC had either banned it or cut it to ribbons or whatever.
Mhm.
And you did get this
On your high horse about
yeah,
gore.
militant. And it's funny now it seems almost quaint in retrospect, that
Mhm.
whole video nasties. But at the time it was no fucking joke because you couldn't see things and you were feeling like, what the
Yep.
fuck? Like, why are we treated like, see, I'm still angry. It doesn't take long. But what's interesting is those Sandy has a slightly more distance, right? And she's like,
Mhm.
she sees how there is a slight kind of there is a slight dark side to that a little bit, right? There's a slight
That
morbidity or something to it.
there's that, and also there is what you have said many times as well, and this gets way ahead of that. The idea that, like, in hindsight now, some of these films are not good films, and
No, no,
they
no,
developed a cachet or like an aura of like legitimacy somehow just because they were banned. But then,
absolutely, yeah,
and I in this kind of does get ahead of that in a way. It says like, yeah, no, some of these films are just shit.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I
And
mean, a lot
yeah.
of stuff on the video nasties list. I mean, it's interesting in a way. It's both giveth and taketh away, right? In a way, it's you're quite right. A lot of it was just rubbish. But on the other hand, I it did kind of give through that lens, it did force a lot of people to examine films on their own terms in a way. And I think
Mhm.
that whole period did force you to develop a taste for like that's definitely I think where the because now everyone and their fucking dog loves not just Argento and
Mhm.
Fulci, but anything Italo
Yeah.
exploitation is like you can release you can release Blu-ray Bruno Mattei
Yes.
films
And there's
and
an
there's like
audience.
film scholars giving commentaries about the film, which is wonderful. But I definitely think that comes through the British side of fandom because a lot of those films did play in the US and stuff, and they wouldn't have been cut. And
Yes.
obviously they did have a certain amount of fandom, but I think it took until obsessive British film fans really because a lot of those Italian video nasty stuff were Italian. I think it was
Mhm.
via that and then really kind of focusing on the Fulcis and the Candle Holocaust. And I think it was real, and then I think that crossed the pond to American fandom. So I
Mhm.
think without that, I'm not sure if that I would have taken longer or I would have done it in a different form. But in terms of North American Eurotrash fandom, I think definitely comes via the Brit video nasties.
Yes.
Does that make sense to you? Because you
Yeah,
were
yeah, it does.
slightly
Which,
in both
but it's a
places.
strange thing. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it does make sense, but it's a very strange thing to think that those films, yeah, that they weren't necessarily hard to come by. I mean, at one point, like, Canada was one of the only places you could get the completely uncut VHS of Last House on the Left. I remember
Oh, okay.
renting it from a video store and being stunned at how LA, how just
Yeah.
depressing and downbeat it is, but also the fact that like the guts being pulled out, it was all in there, and thinking, I don't think you could see this. There's many places that have this
Right. There's a few
uncut.
outliers like that. Like, who would have thought the uncut Emmanuel in America would, why would that be in Venezuela of all places?
Right.
That's where the bootlegs of that came from for the longest time, right? Before, yeah, of course, that's part of a box set now. And
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, no, so that's a nice little addition to it as well. Yeah, no, this is I mean, considering it's 30 plus years old, and there's a few elements to it that are, it does show its age a little bit, I would
Mm-hmm.
say. It doesn't seem entirely, sometimes people say this could have been written yesterday or something. It's not that.
No.
But I really enjoyed this. It was like a rollicking kind of
Oh yeah. Yeah, yeah. No, this was
fun,
tons of fun.
fun
And
little thing.
when it does start to kind of open up, and when the more supernatural elements come in, it's very satisfying. It's
Yeah,
very
yeah. And it
very well
just
done, and it has a nice ending that really that does actually in a way lean into the cursed bloodline element of Lovecraft.
mm,
Um, which is like, yeah, The Outsider and those kind of stories, that it works really well. And as you said, it's hard as well not to read a little bit of the Wicker Man into this too, but it works.
Yeah.
It works
I
really
did,
well.
what I liked about it as well is like it progresses um it it progresses gradually enough that when full-on weirdness starts happening in broad daylight on
Hmm.
stretches of road,
Yeah.
it it's convincing.
Yeah.
You can kind of see, did you get that sense of, did that fucking, that couldn't have just happened,
Right.
but it doesn't
Yeah.
seem out of nowhere, like it's earned the right to suddenly do that, right? uh
So last night I went to see I went to see a Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel tribute act. Which yes,
sure if I should hang up on you now or not.
well, that's why I was going to wait to see how that went. Yeah, it was something Jen was dressed. Actually, the most disturbing thing was I went and I got completely blitzed. I took one of my gummies and had a couple of pints there, so I was completely glassy eyed and just
How else could you deal with anything Phil
well,
Collins, to be honest with
fair
you?
enough. But the um oh
It
yeah,
wasn't,
so
it wasn't Buster the musical, was it?
there were two. No, there were two complete. Forgot that even existed. Not Buster, yeah, Buster. But no, there was two things that were terrifying about the experience. One was that I knew almost every song, and I'm like, how fucking ubiquitous is Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel's music that like I, as an absolute non-fan, could go and be like, I knew I knew 90% of what they played. I guess they're just like middle of the road um radio staples, I guess, in North America where it's constantly played. Anyway, but on the way there, the whole downtown of Charlottetown right now, because it's coming up to Halloween, they have this tradition here where they build these scarecrow people that they tie onto lampposts. So all the way through the town, every lamppost has these creepy scarecrow things with like lolling kind of like bag heads and
Please tell
stuff.
me they have the face of Phil Collins as
They
well.
all do, yes, yes, yeah. Some of them are
That
made out
would
of
be
fruit.
satisfying to burn, I think.
Some of them are made with fruit, like the Sledgehammer video as well. The occasional Peter Gabriel in there. No, anyway, yeah, but it was funny having so recently read this book to be walking streets flanked with these creepy fucking um
See,
yeah.
you spoilt that story because you front loaded it with the
Phil
horrors
Collins.
of Phil Collins, which are
Right.
much
And
more
so
scary
there's
than
no
Jen.
way they can compare,
Oh,
yes.
no, you should have cut that bit out.
Yeah, well, something in the air tonight. Um,
You don't you fucking dare. Um,
um, so yes, yeah, I this is one that I would wholeheartedly recommend. And the other nice thing about this and the other book is how much mileage a horror writer can get without going to the gore well, without,
hmm,
you know, and it's for me, I mean, don't get me wrong, I absolutely enjoy a trashy, splashy, gut-filled thing as
yes.
much as the next guy.
We'll
But
we'll
sometimes,
get to that, I suspect, when we talk Chainsaw Terror in a couple of weeks.
yes, but that said, like there's something really nice about somebody being able to create a palpable sense of dread and a palpable creepiness without having to do that.
hmm, hmm.
Right? And I think Ramsey Campbell does that really well in both of these books.
Well, and also just the ability to tap into, like, there's nothing, everything seemed very familiar to me in terms of, oh yeah, I've been in a situation a bit
Hmm.
like that, or there's again, it's the otherworldliness potentially all around us all the time,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So no, yeah, definitely one that holds up very well. Ancient Images, and
Hmm.
and it'd be interesting to compare it to Theodore Rorschach's Flicker as well, because even though it starts off from a similar place, they're also very different. Like there's a lot. it's a lot more focused specifically on the nature of the cursed film and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Whereas that's only one element of this book. It seems almost like a starting point, and then by the time they actually find the film, um,
Oh,
that's
it's almost doesn't really matter that much.
yeah, and
Yeah.
it works into the story in a different way to do with like a petty rivalry and stuff like that, as
Hmm.
opposed to the specific cursed film thing. Although
Hmm.
that's
That's
in
there too.
there as well. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I certainly wouldn't dissuade from reading either one. Like I think it's worth reading
Hmm.
both of them. So onwards then to
Quite recently, right? This one's
yeah, 2022.
2022 or something. This is post-COVID.
Right. Fellstones.
Here's the nice cover there with a couple of standing stones, a couple of what are
So
they called again? Those
hmm,
standing stones? There's a name for those standing stones. Dolmens, or kind of like dolmen. Well, I guess dolmens have the capstones, right? But
yeah, I don't know, so I'm not even
okay, never mind.
pretend
Okay.
to
Standing
yeah,
stones. We'll call them
yeah,
standing
yeah,
stones.
yeah. I know what you're on about. But yeah, no, but you, what I mean is, yeah, if you get into this stuff properly, I'm guessing you could make a huge faux pas. Like you said, oh maybe no, the Dolman is the one with the and the other
Yes.
one's the fool. Anyway, but I
Hmm.
don't know. So
Yes. Okay. Um,
yes, so Fellstones 2022. This one is about a
this book,
young
I was just
man.
gonna say, this book actually got under my skin more than the other one. And I think it's very specific. I think if you have any kind of like experience of being around very um pushy people and you're slightly socially anxious, that this book will absolutely get under your skin. There was parts of this book where my skin was crawling through what I suppose are probably from the outside relatively innocuous, awkward situations. Right. I mean, as you know, eventually the bigger picture comes out and, it gets more supernatural and more creepy. But even at the very beginning of this book, when he's having a hard time getting out of this house, I'm like, oh, fuck. Like,
Yeah,
he
it's
still wants to go
interesting.
home.
It has a tone which is quite interesting, and again, I'd be interested in reading more Ramsey Campbell if this is common to him or if this is a tone he specifically chose for this book or some of his books. But it's all of considering the hugely you know cosmic kind of
Mhm. Yep.
things at play.
Mhm.
I mean, and the the potential for all sorts of um yeah, unutterable kind
Mhm.
of
Yes.
cause. It's everyone is so polite.
Yes.
Everyone is really polite in this
Yep.
book. Like there's
Mhm.
relationships crumbling, there's people being kept, captive, and
Mhm.
beyond the larger manifest or whatever the fuck is going out in that field with those stones and stuff.
Mhm.
But everyone is, super. But there's no real break where someone just turns around and just says, fuck off. Like just fuck right off. And
Yes.
no one ever does that, right?
No,
Whereas
you're
at
right.
this
You're right.
point
And
in
that's
this
and
book,
that's
if I
part
was
of the
the, I would have,
straitjacket.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
part of the straitjacket that our protagonist is actually in, is that he can't do that, and that everything is so, it's also passive aggressive.
yes,
It's so
yes.
passive aggressive, and that's what really started to feel like I felt really claustrophobic. The
Hmm,
further I got into this book, the more claustrophobic I felt,
yes.
it's been a long time since I've read a book that actually made me that kind of uncomfortable, where I was
Yes,
like
and
I
I
was
suspect it's
short
got
of
to be a
breath.
choice. Right? It's got to be a choice because it does, like you said, it goes hand in hand with the themes and the character, and yeah. So we have this character who's either called Paul or Michael, depending on.
Yep.
I can't remember which one is his
I
first name.
think Paul is his birth name, and then Michael is the name that his adoptive parents just give him,
And
which
he
is,
seems to be. I'm guessing. What is he in his early to mid 20s, something like that?
I would imagine in the book. Yeah, he's kind of out of university now, but not that far out of university.
Yeah, and he's working in, yeah, kind of like a Waterstones type of bookshop.
Bookshop that also
That's
has some
that's
records.
really well drawn as well. So
Yeah, very well observed.
a little aside, like one of the annoying things, because there's a lot of little needling things, but there's this kind of slightly kind of, well, not slightly, very arrogant kind of rock star author who's written
Oh
this
yes.
book. What the fuck is it? It's a riff.
The Beethovens or something like that, like, or is it?
Beethoven's, that's right, yeah.
Yeah,
And it's basically he's written this book about how, yeah, the Beatles kind of put all the great composers to shame or
yeah.
something.
It's roll over Beethoven,
Yeah,
the
it's a
book.
real hipster kind of take on, and you can you can tell Ramsey Campbell's kind of quite delighting in creating this horrible kind of rock
Arse.
star music critic guy,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Like, and
Who has all these
you're fully on board with our main character's antagonism towards him.
thinking this guy's a twat.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Basically, he's a twat, isn't he? He's a twat, but he kind of has to.
Kowtow a little
Uh,
bit
yeah,
to
yeah, because
for
it's
to keep his
part of his
job.
job. Yeah.
And then there's also these in like there's I the other thing that's rung really true is was like I can remember being in Blockbuster Video when I was in my early-ish 20s, maybe 22 or 23, and overhearing like a manager who had to be like 19,
Mm.
like lecturing us like a new employee who was like 16 about like how to upsell customers and like basic all this corporate policy. And I was just like, I sat there, my skin was crawling. Somebody younger than me just parroting this like absolute shit line of like corporate speak. And I was like, what the fuck? Um, so much so, I actually wrote a piece about it in the student newspaper at the university I was at. And then apparently the person who I overheard giving read it and was really mad about it because he immediately recognized himself in my thinly veiled.
You did. You got the zap. You were Rick, the people's poet.
That's exactly what I was. I used to fucking dress like that too.
The
The suit
pigs were
jacket with the
hassling the kids on the street,
it's
and you came
mm,
along and read
yes.
a poem.
Um, so yeah, so there's that stuff as well in the bookshop where they kind of get these like epistles from corporate or whatever that they have to
Hmm.
yeah. Anyway, that all seemed very well observed.
Yes.
I suspect from life.
So there's that, and then all of a sudden, someone turns up in his life from his past, and a kind of like a
Whatever,
sister, like her, a
sister,
sister,
basically.
yeah. And it turns out that his real parents were killed in a car accident,
Which
and
did you get? Did that seems that remains very mysterious to me, and I don't know if I'm just dense and didn't I missed something, or if it just is it never really explained
was it part of,
exactly
yeah, no, I
what
think that's
happened.
deliberate as well, because
Yeah,
you get the feeling that yeah, the Michael Paul character is clearly some kind of chosen one,
yeah,
right?
he's a musical savant, and his
Yeah.
skills are needed for this festival of some kind.
I can't remember what, isn't it in the original Omen film as well? Aren't Damien's real parents killed or something before he becomes part of the, yeah, because he's near the son of a wolf and something or whatever. He's not
Oh,
the, he's adopted,
right.
I think the
Yeah,
Damien.
yeah, I think it's like
Yeah,
a
yeah,
change. It's like a changeling sort of a
yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so there's that again. That is just there, right?
Mhm.
The masterful thing about these books is there's a lot of little things, and they're not necessarily tight, and they don't need to be, right? They're just kind of
No,
just
it's
there
creepier
to
if we don't know.
tickle you, to keep you, there's a lot to chew over and things to think about after because they both of these books work as like kind of just fun romps in a way, but then also when they're done, they're hang on now. There's a lot of and there's one image in particular I'll get to because I thought it was the one truly brilliant thing in this book that was like fuck I've
Hmm.
never thought that before, but
Okay.
that's such a fascinating observation to have. Anyway, so
Mhm.
yes, and so it turns out he was raised by these kind of music obsessed couple and their daughter, and he's got like perfect pitch or something, right? He's got like
Yes.
he has this ability to just understand music, and as it turns out, it might be the music of the spheres, or he's just tuned in a way that is just so natural for him that he doesn't even think about it,
Yeah.
and as such, yes, he was kind of almost kind of forced into this life of music appreciation, and that stuff taken all the
Yeah.
fun sucked out of it in a way.
Yeah, they want him to be a child prodigy, and
Yeah,
he's kind of kicking against it. And as he gets older, he gets more and more angry about being made to perform and
yeah,
forced to
yeah,
trot it out. And yeah, and so eventually he basically leaves, right? And he goes to he chooses another path. He chooses not
yeah.
to study music in
Well, he
university.
changes his name as well. He tries to get.
Yeah,
Crucially, I suppose what's interesting is seeded in there as well is that he doesn't change his name that much. So there's a
no,
slight feeling that he's not entirely leaving that life behind. He's left a little door open for
yeah,
maybe being found, which is of course what happens. And he goes to visit. I was trying to figure out where the village is because he works in Liverpool, right?
Mhm.
He works in the city of Liverpool, and it seems like it's about a 2 hour drive, and he uses the motorway as well.
Mhm.
So I don't know, where's he going? He's somewhere in the northwest, right? He's somewhere. I don't know. It depends which. I was trying to figure out which
Right.
direction he's going in, but I couldn't quite figure out exactly where he was going.
Yeah, not sure. I didn't too much geography work while reading the book.
Maybe there's telltale signs if you know your
Right.
your UK geography. I don't. So I left when I was 19, so I didn't really.
Mhm.
Um, but yes, and so he goes home.
Kind of brought back under false pretenses because basically his sister
Yes,
shows up and says the parents are sick, and that they're frail and they're not doing well, and he needs to come back, and so he's guilted into going back.
yeah, and the village does have these fellstones, right? That's the other thing is that there are these stones, and they seem to. I don't know exactly, but they're super cold, right? And
Yes, yes, and they maybe move around a little bit.
they might, and they radiate something in the same way as when you touch those stones in Children of the Stones, you get some sort of
Mm,
uh,
yeah.
flashback or connection or something, right?
Mhm.
Um, Beyond that, and yeah, and as soon as he goes back, like everything conspires to stop him from ever leaving again in a way. And he
Yes.
does, and he comes back and he goes. But I don't know. Beyond that, I don't know. Do we want to say anything more, or would that be spoilery? I mean, so I tell you what I'll do. As I'll mention the one thing I thought was fantastic,
Mhm.
because that kind of speaks to some of it, right? And we'll see if
Okay.
we leave it there. But there's a scene where he's remembering in his childhood where they're going around turning rocks over
Yeah.
garden, and they turn
Mhm.
rocks over, and invariably every time all these insects that are
Mhm.
there scurry away, right? Like you turn over a rock, oh fuck, there's a slag and
Mhm.
centipede or whatever, and they run away. And I was thinking, oh yeah, fuck yeah, I remember that when I was a
Mhm.
kid. You'd turn over rocks and insects would run away, And then so I can't remember which character, it might be the sister or something, or someone points out, why do you think, like every single stone, pick that, oh, it's insect, invariant every time. And then someone points out, why would you think that if you turned over one of those huge shell stones out there,
Mhm.
why would that be any different? And
Mhm.
then you're thinking, oh, and then, but scaled up.
Yes. Yes.
And I thought that was brilliant. I thought
Mhm.
just a small thing. I
Mhm.
don't know. I don't know if that struck me as so strong an image. I'm wondering if that was where. I wonder if that was the beginning of this book. I'm wondering if that was the one in which
Right.
picture. I
Right.
don't know. But I did that strike you as well? That
Yeah.
that
Yeah. No. It's
that was like,
yeah.
oh yeah, whoa,
Well,
that really
funnily
sent a
enough,
shiver.
it also brings to mind Rawhead Rex.
Yes.
Right? Like more the short story than the shitty movie.
Yes.
But yes, the opening scene of the farmer, wrestling with the standing stone, that's obviously there for a reason, right? It's keeping something in check. Um, yeah, no, I think it's really effective. Yeah, I guess we shouldn't get into it, but there's some great images, like as the book,
Yes.
especially in the final moments of the book when it gets really strange. There's some
Yes.
awesomely
Yes. And also
creepy,
not
weird.
spoilery, but just so I don't want to set up people something that doesn't happen, even though that's such a I would say as well, it doesn't necessarily go into the area of, you know, big Griblies.
No, no,
It's not quite that either,
no.
though you get the sense that yeah, there's something out there or in there or
Hmm.
under there or
Yeah.
wherever the
Mm,
fuck all around
yes.
us.
Between spaces, whatever, where, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, there's so many ways. I mean, From Beyond, right, is the other way of looking at it. You
Yes.
tune in, they're
Yes.
around us
Yes.
the whole fucking time.
Yes.
It's lucky they can't see
The
us, right?
giant centipedes.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but no, I mean, I just think the characters are really well drawn, and particularly those two, his like these overbearing, overweening, like passive aggressive, guilt loading, shitty adoptive parents who maybe had a hand in his parents' death, maybe not, unclear, right? And then all the stuff with the preparations for the festival and the strange kind of the masks made by the local kids at the preschool it all works. It
yeah.
all works in that kind of folk horror.
And there's the kind of unsettling yet also erotically tinged, almost incest
Yes. Oh yeah.
angle.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's that
That for
as well. Uh,
sure. And that everyone else in the town is kind of in on it too. Like it's not just like slowly it becomes clear that like everyone is trying to push him into doing this thing that he doesn't want to do, right? And
but
it
there's
becomes
also the sense
really,
that not it's like there's never like sometimes when you read these kind of things or if you read them watch film or whatever there's a point at where the character the protagonist tries to escape or something and all the villagers are like huh? And that's when the score kicks in and no and like no it's too something like that. But there's never a feeling like the villagers all seem fairly confident. No, don't worry, the lad will come round, and this was meant
oh
to.
yeah,
Like, there's no.
yes. Yeah, it's if anything, it is their certainty, and they're like, that's almost the most disturbing thing. It's like it's just he can't. There's just no way he can't argue his way out of this. He can't get away. It's
And
there's
also
something so fatalistic about it all.
the effortlessness about whatever genius he has or gift or something as well is that when there is like a appears to be some sort of incredibly important ceremony has occurred and he has no idea and it's just come up here for a minute now, Michael,
Mhm,
and
yes,
stand
yes,
there, and he doesn't know what he's supposed to
that's
do,
quite
but
effective
does
because
it.
it
And
took.
from his perspective, it's like, well, I hardly said anything. I just did a few things. But everyone's like, great job. Brilliant, Michael. That was a wonderful performance. And he's just like, what? What? Uh,
And you caught that, did you? I mean, it was quite effective. It took me several lines of reading before because I'm a bit dense, but that I when I noticed that every sentence he says has 7 words in it.
hmm.
It's quite nicely done. Like it takes
Yeah,
a
yeah.
takes a moment to cop on to that. But the other thing that made me laugh is there's a point in the story where he starts remembering this kind of like nursery rhyme or song from like maybe he has sort of participated in some form of this ceremony earlier in life, but he's kind of blocked it out, right? But the first line of it is uh fallstones. And I couldn't help but hear it in Marky Smith's fall sound voice every time he said it.
False stones.
Yeah.
False
Um,
stones. Yeah, yeah, that
yeah.
works. Yeah.
And I started thinking about Prestwich, and I started thinking about whether, because of his interest, like whether Ramsey Campbell and Marky Smith ever had any connection just because of the whole M.R. James Lovecraft love on the part, and there, it's Manchester, Liverpool, weather.
It's a business line, not a chat line. Full stone.
There you go. Yeah. Anyway,
Sorry,
that's one. That's one.
I shamelessly do a bad Marky Smith impression at the drop of a hat.
At any opportunity given.
Yeah.
I hoped you would. I hoped you would. I knew you could do it better than me.
Well, that wasn't even classic because that song as well is entering. That's when he started his growly period as well, isn't it?
Yes.
Like he starts doing that a bit more, which he didn't do before. That's like
No.
That's the last few albums that he starts doing that on. But
yes, that gurgling, the 50-year-old man version of
Mark. Anyway, yes, another great read, FELLSTONES, I think.
Yeah, no, these two books were tons of fun, and I'm really glad I read them in autumn. There was something about reading them right here, right now, as I said, other than having a bunch of scarecrows tied up all over the city, everything is in full autumnal effect. It's all red and yellow leaves right now. It's all the fields going back to. So yeah, it's reading rural horror in a rural area in autumn. This is something I'd like to do every year.
Also, a recommendation for this makes no sense to anyone other than me, really. But when I'm in my cups and I'm in my bath, I tend to read either non-fiction or kind of trashier fiction or pulp fiction. And when it comes to like more kind of well-written fiction, for some reason, I don't do that in the bath with alcohol. That's something I have to. I know it's not. There's something that doesn't. But these were both read under the influence, under the water. So that's a thumbs up from me.
Right. Yeah. No. As I said before, I do think, there is a kind of a dearth of really good contemporary horror writers. Actually, S.T. Joshi, the footnoter extraordinaire, he's a big proponent that basically he says the only really true person carrying on that legacy of the Algernon Blackwoods and the H.P. Lovecrafts and the Mackens is Ramsey Campbell.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to read more of his stuff.
Yeah.
I think starting with the Cthulhu, and is it? I'm imagining it. Did he write a book about his love of the Three Stooges? I think he might have done. I think that's another one of a thing I'm fascinated by as well. I love the Stooges. So there's a Ramsey Campbell book about the Three Stooges.
Yep.
I'm on that, I think.
And yeah, let's definitely agree to do the two films that he recommended as
yes.
kind of.
Well, yeah, I know that those are going to be a hoot. You'll definitely. I'm surprised you've not seen either of them, actually.
No, yeah, no. They sound like tons of fun. So.
Okay, so there we go. We're a bit. I mean, yeah, we're a bit late to the game here, but just in case anyone else out there is even more out of touch than us, that Ramsey Campbell, he's fucking good. You should see him. That's our hot take.
Agreed. Yes, yeah. Well, at least FELLSTONES is actually a relatively.
Oh, that looks like a power fuck. They've come to get him. Oh no. Yugosloth has come for Nick. This is the YouTube equivalent of they're at the door. Ah, right. I better go before it happens to me. Bye. I'm full slam.